the sites are down, or they never provided any information in the first place. Um, it's very frustrating. In general, with Roman art, the people who are portrayed in it are the people who had enough money to pay for it. Unlike today, you didn't have sculptors just running around depicting poor people. They were making a living, just like professional photographers today, and they were taking commissions. Most of the commissioned statues are formal poses using formal clothing, and that's not really representative of what life was like in daily life. There were also, I love this, there were economy statues. If you couldn't really afford to commission a full statue of yourself, you could pick out a standard body and a fairly standard hairstyle, and then they would do some slight modifications to the face to make it look a little more like you, and they would stick the head onto the body. So you had economy statues. I think that's awesome. Most statues appear to have been painted in period, which most people know by now, but the details that were not sculpted have been lost. So, um, unfortunately, we've lost a tremendous amount of information about what the clothing actually looked like. We know that some of the research work that has been done with Greek clothing has shown that it was highly colored and highly patterned, and that does not appear to have been the case with Roman clothing. Romans seem to have preferred solid colors, maybe a complementary colored border, things like that. Not a whole lot of patterns, but we know they had embroidery. We know they talk about embroidery, but we don't really have any depictions of it, of how it might have been used. We have discussions about their capabilities in other ways and other kinds of patterning, but we really don't have any examples. So it's hard to say, but if you tend to stick with solid colors, you'll probably be your best off, at least for the moment. Um, Depictions showing everyday life and the members of lower classes are usually idealized and or they're exaggerated for effect. Like there's one depiction of a drunk old woman who is crouched on the street, and she is hideous, but she's probably been overly exaggerated for effect. Um, the art, the sculpture focuses on the play of light and shadow in the folds of cloth. So the sculptures tend to show really heavy folds, but all of the literature talks about how the fabrics are super light and flowing and fluffy. So again, how do we accommodate the literary references and the sculpture? Hard to say. Mostly what we end up doing is we go to things like the frescoes and other art to see how those people are depicted, and then we kind of head somewhere in the middle. Statues for rich clients often have holes where real jewelry, sleeve buttons, diadems, all kinds of other fancy things were attached. And all of those have disappeared. The only thing we have left are the holes showing where this bust had earrings and had a necklace attached and had something attached to her head, but we don't know what they looked like. I wish we did. That would be awesome. Most sculptures and Roman art in general don't have labels, names, or captions unless it's a grave stele. So the clues about what the art are supposed to be are in the art itself and the location of the piece. And for the most part, that system worked just fine for the Romans. Empresses were the fashion icons of their time, and most empresses worked very hard to have a unique hairstyle. And some of the longer reigning empresses actually had several hairstyles over the course of their reign. And that's one of the things that we use to date artwork is we look at the hairstyle and we say, is this in the Empress Sabine style? Is this in the Empress Livia style? Is this in whoever's style? So that mostly works. Most women did want to kind of imitate the stylish hairstyle of the Empress. However, as with today, there were especially older women who would pick a style in their youth and then they would never change their hairstyle throughout their lifetime. So they might be depicted at, 40 or 50 years old with a hairstyle that was actually dated more appropriately to something, 10, 15, 20 years earlier, sometimes more. So again, everything with Roman artwork has to be taken with a slight grain of salt. You need to use as many sources as you can. My rule of thumb is to always try to find three examples. So if you find something that's strange, try to find two more examples that depict it before you say this is something that actually happened and I can imitate it. Sometimes you can't find anything else and it's just too cool to give up, and I get that. I've made some of those and I wear them proudly, but that's not an ArtSci entry because there's just not enough evidence. Some of the issues we have with the Roman paintings and mosaics, which I touched on a little bit ago, were that the Egyptian encaustic paintings, for example, are fabulous resources, but they're limited to a specific region in the empire, and they usually show only the head and shoulders. So we're assuming, based on things that we know, literary sources, mentions things that are said in plays and in comedies, all kinds of other information, we're assuming that the same styles that were being worn by those Egyptian women are also being worn by other Roman women, because they're all part of the same empire. They're all dressing the same way. They're all the tunics are all about the same, appearing about the same time. So we believe that these are a reasonably accurate depiction of something that a Roman woman might have worn at the same period of time. But we can't know for sure, because unfortunately the climate of Rome does not leave us a whole lot to work with. Frescoes reflect the taste and interest of the person who commissioned the artwork. So, this is my house and this is what I want it to look like. I don't care what you want. This is what I like. Same now, same then. Same. Not to mention all the damage to the paintings themselves and the chemical changes in the paint due to atmospheric issues. Colors have changed. In some cases, they've darkened or lightened. In many cases, they've changed entirely, and it's not the shade that we see now is not necessarily the shade that it was when it was made. Mosaics are fascinating because somehow they managed to simplify everything into a form that can be made with little tiny tiles. And they still manage to give us an awful lot of information and details. But still, remember that everything has been simplified down to be able to be made into a mosaic in the first place. So, unfortunately, when we're looking at Roman art, we don't have a lot of other things to back it up with. There's not a lot of extant textiles because Italy has a moderate climate, and the textiles rarely survive under most conditions. There are almost no extant Roman-era textiles in Italy, sadly. There are a comparatively large number of extant Roman-era textiles in Egypt due to the hot and dry conditions there. But again, you raise the question, is this typical of what was worn in Rome and other parts of the Roman Empire, or is this Egypt-specific? We tend to think that it's typical, but there's no way of knowing for sure. So, there are a smaller number of extant Roman-era textiles surviving in wet sites in France, Germany, and Britain, but they're usually tiny, tiny fragments rather than actually full garments. The most amazing find of a Roman-era textile ever, I think, is the Martre de Fer digs. If you haven't heard of him, you should look it up. It's really fascinating. I did an ArtSci project on it several years ago. Martre de Fer the area has gas deposits, and the individuals that they found were buried in wooden coffins. So the individuals were buried, covered over by the earth. The earth sealed up over top of the coffin, But the porous wood of the coffin allowed gas to get into the coffin, but then it couldn't get back out again. It basically became trapped. So it preserved the corpses and the materials and all of the things in these coffins. And then when they were discovered, the people who found them excavated the coffins, popped open the lid, and it was like a scene out of Indiana Jones. They're looking down at this corpse that looks like she had died just maybe last week. She still looked fresh. They said that she still had color in her cheeks. They could hardly believe that she had been buried for all this time, and then she crumbled into dust. And all that was left were the textiles and her hair and the other grave goods that were in the coffin. Amazing. So anyway, we have an entire garment plus some of the accessories. She was wearing stitched cloth stockings with threaded through garters. She's wearing an entire tunic. She's wearing a sash. She has false hair pieces. We know a tremendous amount about what was being worn in this area, at least by this person. What we don't know is really much of anything about her herself, other than the grave goods that we found and this amazing story. So if you're interested in more information on that, I have my research for that ArtSci project posted on my website. Anyway, so that pretty much sums up a lot of the issues that we have with using Roman art to document Roman clothing. And if you're interested in Roman culture and Roman clothing, Roman research, all of that kind of stuff, there's a lot of great people in the SCA. They have a lot of great websites and a lot of resources. I have a website too. It's called Dulcia's Roman Closet, and I invite you to come and poke around. Thanks.